Hello everybody and welcome to this new tutorial. Today we are going to talk about FA2 parameters. Often you want to create an application that communicates with an FA2 smart contract on the Tezos blockchain, and you're going to use Taquito for that. And you may wonder how to format the parameters correctly in order to send them to the contract from the front end. In this video you're going to learn how to do it. This tutorial is going to assume that you have prior knowledge of Taquito and TypeScript so you can follow along. Now, let's dive into it. As you may know by now, every good Tezos front-end application starts with import Tezos toolkit from Taquito. So we are going to write a little bit of boilerplate code here, but let's assume that you know how to set up Taquito properly, you know how to set up a wallet through Beacon Wallet, and we are just going to focus on the code that you need to write in order to send parameters to an FA2 contract. For this tutorial, we are going to assume that you want to send parameters to the UUSD contract. UUSD is a typical FA2 token that exists on the Tezos blockchain. Here is some code to refresh your memory about how to create a new instance of the Tezos toolkit and how to create a pointer to the UUSD contract. Now let's have a look at the code that you have to write in order to format the parameters for the transfer entry point. You're going to call the transfer entry point when you want to transfer tokens from one account to another. On the Michelson side, the transfer entry point takes a list of pairs with different fields. So we are going to write JavaScript code that mimics that format in order to send a contract call to the transfer entry point of the UUSD contract. A list of parameters on the Michelson side is going to be represented by an array on the JavaScript side. Each parameter in the list is a pair with the value of type address on the left side and another list of parameters on the right side. In order to create such a value in JavaScript, we are going to pass an object as a parameter with one property called from and another property called transactions. In the from property, we are going to specify the address of the account that's sending the tokens. The TXS property or transactions is going to receive a list of parameters that represent the recipients, the token ID, and the amount of tokens that have to be sent. In order to represent these parameters, we are going to create an array of objects. Each object is going to have three properties: a to property with the address of the recipient, a token ID property with the ID of the token that needs to be transferred, and finally the amount of tokens that's going to be transferred. In this case, for the UUSD contract, the token ID is 0. Now that we have formatted the parameters properly, we are ready to send a transaction to the transfer entry point of the UUSD contract. This is going to be a regular contract call, the way you used to do it with Taquito. You just call the methods property on the contract abstraction and then the name of the entry point, here transfer, which is a function where you pass the parameters for the transfer and then you call the send method. Once the transaction is sent, we are ready to wait for the confirmation. Now, let's have a look at the update operator's entry point. The FA2 standard specifies that you can allow third parties to transfer your tokens on your behalf. That's what the update operator's entry point does. Let's see how to format the parameters to send a transaction to that entry point. Just like the transfer entry point, the update operator's entry point takes a list of parameters. The parameters to pass in the list are objects with a single property. The property is add operator if you want to add a new operator, or remove operator if you want to remove an existing operator. The add operator or remove operator properties take an object as a value. This object has three properties: an owner property with the address of the owner of the tokens, an operator property with the address of the operator to add or to remove, and then a number for the token ID. The FA2 standard allows you to add and remove the same operator in the same transaction, so this example is not a problem. After that's done, we are just going to send the parameters to the contract in a transaction by calling the update operator's method on the methods object and then call send to forge the transaction. After that, we can wait for the confirmation. Taquito also allows you to batch and update operators and transfer transaction into a single transaction. That can be very useful if you need to set an operator and transfer tokens on behalf of a user. As you are familiar with Taquito, the way to batch those two operations is not going to be a surprise for you. You just call the batch method on the wallet instance, and then we're going to use the with contract call method to create those contract calls. The first contract call that we create is the update operators one, and the parameters here are going to be exactly the same ones that we've seen a couple of minutes ago. For example, here we want to add an operator, so we are going to pass an object with the add operator property and set an object as the value with an owner property, an operator property, and then the token ID. After that, we are going to create the contract call to the transfer entry point by passing the same parameters that we've seen earlier. An array of objects where each object represents a transfer of tokens, with the from property representing the sender and the list of transactions with the address of the recipient, the token ID, and the amount of tokens to be transferred. With Taquito, you can chain as many contract calls as you like using the with contract call method. And once you're done, you don't forget to call the send method in order to forge the transaction. After that, we are ready to wait for the confirmation of the batch operation. And that is it. That's all you need to do in order to send complex transactions to an FA2 contract in order to transfer tokens or update operators. You can see that once again, Taquito is an amazing tool in order to make your life easier as a Tezos developer. It takes care of all the formatting and all the forging of transactions, and you just have to write some JavaScript code in order to interact with an FA2 contract. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.